All right, so this little tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do a basic inventory system inside of Unity, and then be able to save that when you go from one scene to the next. And what I've done is I've started a 2D Unity project, and that's pretty much it. I dragged in some assets from Glitch the Game so that we can put this together, and I'm going to code up some of this stuff pretty quick, just to demonstrate how we handle the inventory and not necessarily how you make a great game. But that's what we're going to work on. So I dragged in this little desk here. It's like a trophy case or something, but the only reason we're using it is just to make it so that we have a platform to stand on. And then I'll drag my little guy in here. And some of this stuff we've done before, so if you have questions, let me know. But we'll go through it kind of quick. So I'm going to add a Physics 2D box collider to this thing so we have something that we can walk on. And I'll just move the Y value down just a tad so that our little guy can walk on that. And then I'm also going to give him Physics 2D, we'll give him a rigid body, and we'll also give him a box collider. And if we run, that should allow him to fall and land on the ground. There we go. And we're going to pick up some of these items. We have 3 things that we're going to be able to pick up in our scene, and we'll keep track of how many we have of each of those, and then be able to save those things off for when we switch scenes. So let's see, how are we going to do that? I'm going to create a script here, C# script, and this is going to be we'll call it a guy controller, because we do need to move him around. Let me shorten this thing up. We do need to move move him around, so we're going to do that inside of this code here. And I'm just going to add in some quick controls to move him left or right, and we'll make a public variable for speed. So we'll be our float for speed, and then we'll say if input dot get key code dot right arrow. So if if the player is pressing the right arrow, we'll do this. We'll move to the right. We'll copy this, do the same thing for left. And so if he's pressing the left arrow, we can move to the left. And we could get as fancy as we want with this, but we're not going to get that fancy. And then we'll write our 2 new methods. Void move right. And so we'll say vector to position. It's going to equal our current position. And then we will increment our x value by speed. And then we will set our transform position back to our modified position. And then the same thing for move left, except we're going to subtract the x value. And that'll be a minus. And we'll set our speed. I'm just going to set a default to equals 0.1. Float. And let's see what happens here. Okay, so now we can move him back and forth. And yeah, he's kind of moonwalking back, and there's not a nice animation, but that's okay. We don't really care about that. Let's make the camera follow that thing around. So I'm going to drag the camera on top of my guy, and now it should be able to just follow. So as we're moving, the camera is moving along with him, and that's good. The other thing I'm going to do on my camera, I'm just going to get rid of this. I don't like this default blue color, so I'm just going to change it to something a little different. And then that way, I don't know, it's just my preference. I don't really care for that blue very much. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to collect some of these things, and we'll collect them one at a time. And what we need to do is we need to put up, first they need to be in the scene. And if we hit play, you'll see that it is just this apple, or this tomato is just sort of floating there. We're going to make it drop to the ground and give it some properties so that we can interact with it. And we've done this similar before, I think. We need to give it a rigid body so that it'll fall. And we also need to give it we can give this thing I'll give it a circle collider, why not? give it a circle collider so that we can actually interact with it. And if we do that, we'll see that we can push this thing. Oh, huh. That was kind of crazy. Yeah, so, oh, look at that. So what's happening is, I believe, this is looking all kinds of weird because I think what's happening is our little alligator guy is rotating, and so is the camera. It's sort of following us as we do that. So let's lock the rotation of our little guy. And you can do that by clicking on your guy and then going over here to the constraints under the rigid body, and we'll just freeze the rotation in the z-axis. And let's see, is that going to help? Yeah. So now we're kind of pushing this thing along instead of doing all kinds of weird things with the camera. So that's good. We can hit this and move it. And but what we want to do is be able to pick it up. We also need to know what it is. So I'm going to tag this thing. And if we select the tomato and go over here on the right, this is where we can tag it. And right now there is no tag for tomato. So I'm going to add a tag. The list is empty, so I'll add one. I'll call it tomato. I'm also going to add some more while we're in here. We have a star that we're going to use, and barrel. B-A-R-E-L. I spelled barrel. How about, let's make this thing a, what do they call it? Bag? Barrel. Oh, there it is. All right, I had it right. Just looked wrong. All right, so let's go back to adding tags. And we'll add one more for barrel. B-A-R-E-L. Looks wrong, but apparently it's right. So I'll click back on my tomato, and then I can tag it as a tomato. And then now inside of our guy controller, I'll go back to it, we can do some things with collisions. So the way we check for collisions is the function is void on collision enter 2D, and we pass it a collision 2D parameter. And remember that all of this stuff is case sensitive. So this is wrong and this is right. And same goes for all this stuff. We have to override this exactly, otherwise we won't be able to see it. So here we go. And now this is the object that we collided with. Remember, this thing is attached to our guy, so this is what we collided with. And so we can say if call.gameObject.tag equals tomato, then we can do something. Grabbed a tomato. And you know, same thing for our other tags. Say else if we ran into a star, or we ran into a barrel, we can do some things. So what do we want to have happen? We want to have, we're going to pretend that this is an inventory. So we want the tomato that we collided with to disappear from the screen, and we want to increment our amount of tomatoes that we have. And so we can put some variables up here that keep track of our inventory. So I can say int num tomatoes equals 0, int num stars equals 0, int num barrels equals 0. So if we crash into a tomato, what do we want to have happen? Num tomatoes plus plus, and we want to destroy our tomato, so we can destroy call.gameObject. So although we're not showing it on the screen yet, we'll put that there in a sec. This is just going to increment the number of tomatoes that we have, that we're carrying. We're going to start with 0. Every time we collide with one, we're going to increment our count, and then we're going to delete the tomato object from the scene. That way we can't collect it twice. So let's see if it actually just kind of plays right. So what should happen is when I crash with this thing, it goes away. And in fact, it got deleted from this side over here too. It just completely got deleted from our game. So since that worked, we can kind of assume that our counter worked as well. And so I'm just going to copy these lines here and paste them in. And this will be num stars plus plus, and this will be num barrels plus plus. So our inventory system is probably pretty close to working. Let's put up some stars. And again, we're going to have to add a physics 2D, a rigid body, and I'm just going to do box colliders because it's easier to just do it very quickly. And I'll tag this thing with a star, and then we could probably have 2 stars out here. Actually, let me do that. So I'm just going to, well, here, I'll show you this. We can put out barrels too, add component, physics 2D, rigid body 2D, and we'll add a component, physics 2D, box collider 2D. Now, if we start to add more, we always have to go through the process of adding a rigid body and a box collider to these, but we can do something called prefabs. Oops. Create a folder. And I'm going to make a folder called prefabs. And these are sort of like things that we save. So like if I want to create a new barrel and I dragged it up from assets in here, I would have to add a rigid body and a box collider to it. Now I could just duplicate these things, but that doesn't work if we switch scenes. So what I can do is create a prefab. So if I just drag this barrel down here, that creates a barrel prefab. So it's the barrel image, the rigid body, and the box collider. Same thing for this toy star, and same thing for the tomato. And then now I can just start placing more of these things by dragging them in, and I don't have to worry about adding all this stuff to it. And so now if I run, let's see what we got. Notice that when I picked up the tomato, it knew which one I picked up, and it deleted it from the scene. Oops. And the barrels are not getting picked up, and let's try to figure out why. Here's our star, which is tagged as a star, tomato tagged as tomato, barrel is not tagged. So the cool thing is, now that this thing is a prefab, I can come up here and I can change it to a barrel, and that's going to save it for all of my barrels. So now this one's a barrel and that one's a barrel. And all I had to do was change it in one spot. So that's another reason why you'd want to use prefabs, is that when you need to make a modification to all of them, it all goes right away. And now let's see if this actually works better. Collect. There we go. So, you know, technically we have an inventory because these variables tell us what we actually have. We're not displaying it, so let's just go ahead and display that on our screen. So I'm going to add UI text, and it created a canvas. I'm going to change the canvas to screen space camera. We've done in some other ones of these, we've done some talking about the different methods for the canvas, so you can go check those out if you want to. But this is just the easiest way, I think, to work with the canvas. And it needs to know which camera we're using, so we'll use this main camera. Especially in 2D games, this makes a lot of sense to me. And then we'll say scale with screen size. That way, essentially the text is always the same percentage size of the screen. You know, move it up. Here's our text. There it is. And this thing here, we'll call it tomatoes. And our initial text will say tomatoes 0. And I will duplicate this a couple times. This one will be stars. And we'll move it down. And this one will be barrels. And we'll move that one down. And so stars, we'll set the text to stars. And again, for an inventory system, you don't necessarily have to always have stuff on the screen. As long as you're storing the variables in memory, that's perfectly okay. So yeah, okay. So here we have all of our items that are in our inventory. Right now they're all zeros, but we'll fix that. So what I want to have happen is in our code, we need a reference to all of these text objects, and then we need to just update the text on the screen as we change the amount of items in our inventory. So I will have up here some new public variables. These are going to be text. But by default, we don't know what a text object is, so we need to use another library which is unityengine.ui. So once I include that, then we know what text is. And we can call this tomato text. We'll have 3 of them again. We'll have star, and we will have barrel text. And then anytime we update these counters, we also need to update the string on the screen. So if we're updating num tomatoes, we can say tomato text.text equals tomato plus num tomatoes. And then for stars, this is going to be star text equals stars, and this will be num stars. And this one is barrels, so this will be barrel text, barrels, and num barrels. And that should do it. I mean, really all we're doing is anytime we're changing the value of one of these things, we're updating it on the screen. We created these public reference to these objects, and if we come in here and look at our guy and at our script, over here, since we made those public, we can see them, and we need to drag them in. So I'm going to drag in the tomato text from our canvas on top of here, the stars text from our canvas over here, and the barrel text over here. And if we run, let's see what happens when we pick up 1 tomato. There, that it incremented to 1, 2, 3 stars, barrel, barrel. So now it's looking pretty good. Correctly keeping track of an inventory. So I'm going to show you a quick way to save an inventory that will persist between scenes, and it will even persist between running of your application. So you can save exactly the contents of your inventory when you exit the app or when you switch scenes. So I'm going to put, let's see, how should we do this? I think I want to go to assets, no. Actually, all I was looking for was my glitch folder, which I don't see out here anymore, but what's this? Let's just use this thing. I just needed some other graphic. I'm going to drag this thing down here. And this is just some kind of bowling ball. Actually, I put it in the wrong spot. But when I collide with this thing, I want to switch scenes. That's all I was looking for. So I'm going to move that here, and we'll add component, physics 2D, circle collider, add component, physics 2D, rigid body 2D, and then we're going to tag this thing finish. And I'm going to save this scene right now. So when I hit this finish, we want to jump to a new scene. And let's see, back to our canvas, I'm going to add one more. I'm going to duplicate this tomatoes, and I'm going to call it level text. Or just level. How about just level? I'll move it over here. And the text I'm going to say here is just going to be level 1. And I'm going to save all this, and it's all saved into this .unity. And down here I can do a command D or control D, and I'll create another one, which this will be level 2. Now if I double click on that one, I can change my level text to be level 2. And if I run on this one, we'll see that it does say level 2 and everything else still works. But what I want to do, let's save that and go back to level 1. When I collide with this thing, I want to switch levels. And so the tag on that one is called finish. So if I go back to my collision handling, else if the tag is finish, then we want to go to the next scene. And in order to do that, we need to actually include another library. So using Unity Engine, Unity Engine.scene management. And if we include that, then down here we can say something like scene manager dot load scene, and it's going to want to know our scene name, or I think we can say, so in this case, we want to say, what does it say? Do we have this? Active scene. So I think we can say something like load scene, scene manager dot get active scene +1. Is that going to do it? I think it'll take that. So we want to load the next scene is all that I'm trying to do. And so if we go back in here and we run, let's see what actually happens. Oh boy. Nope, it's not going to like that. So they changed this. It used to be, they used to call things levels. Now they're calling them scene. How about this? So dot build index. There it is. Took a while. Yeah, they changed this recently, either in Unity 5.3, I think it changed, which is what we're currently at. And so anyway, so this is how you do it. So we get our active scene, what the build index is, we're going to +1. So the +1 just says, go to the next level. We're going to blow up on level 2 because there is no next level, but that's all right. That's a whole nother deal that we can worry about. But anyway, so this is going to do the next, load the scene that is the next one in our build index. And if we run, this isn't going to work, but I'll show you what it'll do. So we're still in level 1, capturing all this stuff. I crash into this thing, and we did not load our next level. So there's a couple reasons why that didn't work. So let's take a look at why finish. So why did that not? I knew it wasn't going to work, but I thought it wasn't going to work for different reasons. But let's just work through this. So one of the things I noticed was that our little guy was behind this, our floor. And so I'm going to move this floor back to a -1 in the layer so that we can actually see everything fall in front of it. The other thing that it should have been complaining about is that inside of build settings, we didn't have anything in there. So I'm going to add both for our scenes. That way it knows when we do a build index +1 where we're headed. And so if I run that, let's see. There. So at this point, then we jumped all the way to level 2. So let me watch that again. So fixing that did make a big difference, and we got all of our stuff here. Then as soon as I hit this little ball, we're going to jump to level 2, but notice our inventory and see what happens. So as soon as I hit that, our inventory all goes back to 0. But we are on level 2, and all this stuff is here, and this is all kind of messed up too with him being behind it. So let me save this and go to scene 2 and make my same change, which is to move this thing back a layer. So there we go. All right, so we are able to switch levels, but our inventory didn't stay. So what I'm going to do is when it's time to go to the next scene, I'm going to save these values, our number of tomatoes, stars, and barrels, off to the disk. And then that way, when we pull up the new scene, they'll be there and ready for us. And the way I'm going to do it here will also allow us to have everything in memory when we start the game over again, which may or may not be what you want, but I'll show you how to do that. And if you don't want it that way, there's different things you can do as well. But for now, I just want to show you how we can persist data between scenes. And we can do that through something called player prefs. So we can say player prefs.set int, and we're going to set the int. What are we going to call it? We will call our variable name num tomatoes, and the value will be num tomatoes. And same thing over here. Oops. We'll have num stars and num barrels. Num stars, num barrels. And so that's going to save it off. But the other part that we need to do is when we load this in the next scene, we need to read them out of player prefs and set our variables. So we can say num tomatoes equals that, num stars equals, and num barrels equals. And instead of setting the int in the start function, we were going to be getting the int. And we only need the variable name, so we don't need these pieces over here. Like that. And with those little pieces of code, so again, all we did is when it's time to go to the next scene, we save all this stuff off on the disk. And when it starts up, we're going to load them all back in here. So this is going to have a weird side effect, but I'll leave that up to you to correctly handle. So here we are in level 1. I go all the way through. We have 3 tomatoes, 1 star, 2 barrels. And let's see what happens as soon as I grab one of these. So now it started out with all zeros, which is wrong. But let's just see what happens when I get one of these things. It jumped to 4. So what actually happened is we did persist the number of tomatoes going into the next round, but in our start method, we never actually updated the display. So we need to do something like this and this. Oops. So we need to update all of our text objects as soon as we start, and then it should look okay. Now, the way we did this, it persisted it on the disk or on the flash if you're on mobile. So when I run this, we're gonna have 4 tomatoes even in level 1. Oh, because we didn't get to the save point last time, we started with 3. So that makes sense. So now we have 3, 1, 2, and as we get all these things up, we have 6, 2, 4. We hit this thing. Now we're in level 2, and all of this stuff is here all ready for us. So that's how you can persist data between scenes. And notice that the finish thing is not tagged correctly in this one, but that's okay. We can worry about that later. And actually, the reason is we are trying to go off the index. We only have 2 scenes. We're trying to jump to the third one, which doesn't exist. So we're just going to stay here and keep pushing this thing around. But that's how you can persist data in an inventory. You could, if these were weapons, you could tie throwing them to certain buttons and always subtract from your inventory, just like we were adding here. You could always subtract out of there one at a time. But if you want to persist stuff from scene to scene, you can do it this way. You can also do a do not destroy or don't destroy on load on your game object is another way to do that. And that doesn't persist it on the disk, though. That will only persist it for that running. So that's another way you can do things. Maybe we'll talk more about that one later, but for right now, doing player prefs is probably going to be good enough for what everybody needs. So that's how you can save stuff between